Welcome everybody to Triad Golf Podcast. I'm John Brasier with Triad Golf Magazine, triadgolf.com, and of course the Triad Golf Podcast. And we've got a great show today. We've got author, sports editor, all kinds of publicist, Ward Clayton, who has written a book and updated it now called The Legendary Caddies of Augusta National. It's a great book. I read it over the weekend, and he's got a lot to tell us. It's always fun to get a look behind the curtain of major events, and I think that's certainly the case with the Legendary Caddies of Augusta National. And first of all, just want to say hi, Ward. I guess we've known each other kind of for about 35 years. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I think we're both ink stained wretches. We go back way. I think you were in Myrtle Beach and I was working at the Durham newspaper, and I think that's how we first met. So
okay. No, well, that may be true. I think you were already at the Chronicle, and Ward, one of probably the toughest jobs you can ever have. Ward he was the sports editor at the Augusta Chronicle for a decade and Masters Week. Holy cow. We had a tournament in Myrtle Beach where we did 532-page sections day after day of a senior tournament. But to be the sports editor of the Augusta Chronicle and have the golf world checking you out for 7 days is a pretty tough gig.
yeah, it was the hardest part of that was we did a 64-page special section in advance of the tournament. So we'd send people to Florida for a couple of weeks before the tournament to sort of talk to players and so forth like that. So that was the biggest mountain to climb, was putting the special section together before the tournament. But everybody wanted to get that section on the Sunday before the Masters, so it was a great resource.
But you couldn't miss anything, because the worst thing is to have somebody from out of town, and everybody was there. Find the big story that you guys didn't have, and I don't think that really ever happened to my knowledge. But as for the trips to Florida, we had the same thing in Myrtle Beach. We would go weeks in advance to get that. Everybody loved that. The writers loved. I'm sure they loved going to TPC and wherever else they went back there to prepare.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Even in Augusta in beginning of the year, it gets pretty chilly, and so therefore escaping to Florida was always something that everybody was trying to get their foot in the door to do that. So no doubt.
Well, let me set the stage for what we're going to talk about, and tell me how you first got involved with this book. And this was written, I believe, 2004. Is that right, Ward?
Correct.
First edition.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What was the idea there? How did it come to you to do that?
Well, it's an extension of what we were just discussing. When we would put together these special sections for the Augusta Chronicle, we would do a lot of historical deep dives. And we would occasionally, in the 40s and the 50s, we'd run into just occasionally, a mention of a caddy. But quite often it was just by his nickname. And so therefore I said, gosh, what was this guy's real name? Where did he come from, et cetera, et cetera. And so eventually in 1999, I got a call in the office from a lady, and she said, I'm calling to let you know that my dad, Willie Peterson, who caddied for Jack Nicklaus, just died. And so therefore that extended. I said, well, wow, this is a sign that we need to examine this much further. And there were always book publishers running around before the Masters trying to get their book mentioned in the special section or during Masters Week, because they thought that was a valuable public relations tool. And so one book publisher in particular said, is there a book out there? And I said, well, there might be. I think there might be a book on the Augusta Caddies. And I think that started that. It was about a 4-year process, John, of doing like an ancestry.com kind of search, where you're, number one, seeing if the guy's still alive, and number two, if not, who he's related to, who's still in town that can sort of connect the dots and find out a little bit more about these caddies in particular.
Now, you have a lot of anecdotes and you tell about a lot of caddies. And, I'm going to just ask you a few questions that I had from reading it, because, first of all, I guess there's some racial overtones to this. This was, it was black caddies, white players, white members, right? We're talking about the Old South, Augusta, Georgia. How hard was it for you to, and I don't know, you've had to work with the Masters people. You've had to work with, how hard was it for you to do a story? And you did a great job of, I think, being fair and telling the whole story without preaching either way. But how hard was that for you to do that?
I don't think it was very difficult because I think sort of my what I always thought about was these guys didn't get a lot of attention, A, because they were caddies.
Hmm.
Caddies weren't tremendously well thought of. Uh,
Right.
and secondly, they were all black. So
Yeah.
therefore, probably back in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s, a lot of the media probably didn't give them a time of day because they didn't think their readership would be interested in that. So I think giving these guys their due was an easy thing to get a hold of and to motivate me because a lot of them had their stories that they had really never told for a wider readership. So that was interesting to hear what they had to say. I got the usual stuff, John, and you probably had this happen before. People, when you call it, people want to talk about it. They go ask me how much I'm going to pay them,
Ah,
something like that. So they had the caddy mentality. They were wondering if,
your text in the mail, by the way, Lord.
yeah, exactly. So that I wasn't going to do that. I was telling them, this is an opportunity to tell your story about what happened, the people you work with, things like that. And eventually most of them would come around and want to really tell their story because they figured it was valuable. The only thing you got to keep in mind, John, is dealing with caddies. They have great insight, but you also have to figure out, I got to fact check this because some of these stories may be outlandish and you got to make sure they're accurate.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. So what are the Augusta folks? What have you gotten any feedback from like the membership at Augusta National? What do they think of your books?
Oh, I think the membership loves it. There's a number of members who I've spoken with about it. They didn't want to go on the record, of course, but who had caddies that worked for them for years, and they cherish that relationship. There's one gentleman who's a member. When his caddy died, he got a plot to bury him over in the cemetery adjacent to Augusta Country Club and Augusta National, where he could almost see Amen Corner.
Yeah.
Uh, so therefore, I think those relationships were terrific, and I'll say that caddy, if you've never played golf with a caddy, it adds another layer of enjoyment to playing around the golf. It's unbelievable.
It is. It's different. It's relaxing to walk around and not have your clubs and to get some advice when you might need some. And those guys, that's their job is to work there at that course. And for somebody like me, I played there twice because I was a media guy. I have no clue what the putts are going to do.
Yeah.
So you need, and the members, I'm sure a lot of the members, well, most of the members are out of town. They come down. They probably play a handful of times a year. I don't know. Maybe they play more than that, but they don't know the course like the caddies do. That's for sure.
Oh, no doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt. And I'll cite, Mike Kaiser, who developed Bandon Dunes.
Hmm.
One of the cornerstones of when he developed the golf program there was that caddies were going to be front and center because he realized that if John Brasier and Ward Clayton come and play 54 holes at the golf course at Bandon, the majority of their time is not eating dinner or sleeping, even though, or whatever like that. It's hanging with your caddy. So the
Yeah.
caddies have got to be treated correctly, and therefore they're public relations ambassadors for the place if they're in a good frame of mind.
So here's one of the questions I had, and I thought about it is, you know, did these caddies have other jobs for the most part, or was this their primary employment? And if it was, did they ever? What kept them doing it year after year? Do you think?
Jariah Beard, who passed away a couple years ago, caddy for Fuzzy in 1979. Jariah worked at a local mill
Hmm.
overnight. So he'd work the midnight shift. He got off work at 8 o'clock in the morning. He made a beeline to Augusta National and went and caddied. So a lot of them had other jobs.
Right.
And some of them even did the whole situation in Augusta National. A lot of people don't know it's a winter club, so it closes for the summer. So a lot of them went to places like Atlantic City or Michigan or somewhere up in the Northeast and caddied in the summer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they did that as a year-round gig. But others that just relied on the on their caddying stuff, that was so vital for them to work there. It was, if they developed a relationship with a professional golfer or a member, Carl Jackson is famous for working for Jack Stevens forever, who became the chairman of the club. And
Mhm.
Carl befriended him, and Jack Stevens hired Carl to be his right-hand man in a lot of his business dealings. And Carl, to this day, is now in Arkansas at Jack Stevens' club, working as a caddy master emeritus.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering about that, whether, some of these relationships, whether some of these, gosh, powerful businessmen throughout America would say, hey, Carl, this guy Carl's pretty good at what he does. I bet I got a job for him in my organization. And you just kind of,
Exactly. So not only did Carl have a terrific relationship with Ben Crenshaw, but
right.
his relationship with Jack Stevens led to him having that relationship with Crenshaw, and then led to further employment for him in Arkansas and with Stevens. Which keep in mind, Jack Stevens' company was the financial company behind the start of Walmart.
Now, wait a second. I thought that was Sam Walton and his brother. Sam.
Well, Jack Stevens is the Wall Street guy behind a lot. Jack
Uh,
Stevens and his brother were sort of the financiers who helped make
okay.
that come to pass. So that's a pretty good business model there.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because that's one of the questions I had. Well, gosh, I hope some of these guys, there was some upward mobility at least by meeting these wealthy businessmen who learned about their abilities. So that's
Exactly.
good. That's good. That's good to know. So who you mentioned Carl Jackson. Um, Gosh, now that you're on just this obscure little podcast with me, who's the best caddy? If you're gonna, who's the number one draft choice of all time among the caddies? If you think, you know, who would people pick?
Guy named Willie Pappy Stokes.
Okay, I remember his nickname in there.
Pappy Stokes has won five Masters titles, twice with Hogan.
Yeah.
So, and the cool thing about Pappy Stokes is his family lived at Augusta National practically and worked on the property before it became Augusta National. When Pappy Stokes was age 12 in the early 1930s, he worked as, quote, the water boy for the workers building the golf course.
Wow.
And when he was out there, a rainstorm would come and he would watch the rain flow from the high point down to Race Creek, and that's how he learned how to read greens.
Yeah. So I mean, as your book details, there's a lot of these guys are smart, and they figured out a lot of ways to help them read the greens and read the golf course. And it wasn't just some guy grabbing the bag every day and just toting it around. I imagine what are the guys? Did you talk to any of the caddies and ask them what they thought of the Bill Murray movie Caddyshack in the late '70s and what that did for the image of caddies? Not a whole lot, I don't think.
No, it didn't do a whole lot. But then again, I don't know if you realize this. Not Bill Murray comes from a family of caddies.
Yeah, sure. From
He and his
Illinois. Yeah.
he and his brothers caddied up in northern part of Chicago, and Bill attests the fact that Saturday Night Live, other comedy groups he was with, caddying was also a cornerstone for him learning how to be successful financially. So
Yeah, well, we don't have them here, I don't think. But when I was in college in the Midwest, our college had a chapter called Yevon Scholars, which
yeah,
was Western Golf Association in the Midwest. Basically they give caddy scholarships, and you go to college for free. Well, your tuition's free, and your room is free, but you have to find meals on your own. So I
yeah.
don't think we have that down here now in the Southeast, do we?
Well, the Evans Scholars Program is really making an effort to try to bust out of just its Midwest, and it's gone farther to the West in the last few years.
Okay.
They'd really love to be down in the Southeast a little bit more and so forth. So I think they're really making efforts to expand their ways. That's a really cool program where you just go caddy at a private club, no matter who you are, and if you reach a certain point, you get a college scholarship. That's really cool.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the changes they made in, I guess, 1983? The tour players, a lot of them wanted their own caddies to be able to come in. There'd been a rule against that. You had to use an Augusta caddy before then, and how all that changed. And I think remember from your book, only about a quarter of the Augusta caddies kept bags for the Masters after that happened. Is that about right? 20 out of 80 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I think that was going to come anyway, John, because golfers were making a lot more money,
Hmm.
and therefore, when you get a percentage, caddies are going to make a lot more money. So it became more of a profession, a weekly profession on tour. So that was going to come anyway, but it would have been nice if it would have been a little bit more of a let them know a little bit more ahead of time. And, if for 1983, if they would have determined that, hey, if you're a first time player here, or if you're an amateur or something like that, we're going to ask you to take one of our caddies. Was
I
that?
get, I get,
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that struck me the most, and you know, I guess might not have might not have seemed that way back 50 years ago or longer, but it's almost, the fact that Augusta didn't have black players, it's almost the same to me that they didn't have white caddies. I'm looking at it from a perspective looking back, but it's almost as if saying, okay, white people are above caddy or whatever. And I don't know if that's the way they meant it, but if people struggled with that, what did the caddies think of that? That white people weren't allowed to be caddies?
There were a couple white caddies, but I don't know that they reached the capabilities of these guys. In my mind, it's sort of like if I grew up in the Bronx, John,
Mm-hmm.
adjacent to Yankee Stadium, I'm going to want to do anything I could to go work in concessions, or be a bat boy, do whatever like that. And so what happened at Augusta Sandhills, the community where a lot of these caddies grew up, you can walk 2 blocks and you're at Augusta Country Club. You can walk around the outskirts of Augusta Country Club and you're at Augusta National. So you could walk next door and get a job as a kid. And so I think a lot of it was due to the fact these guys in the 1930s just could walk next door and get a job, and therefore they brought their cousin or their brother or whomever that would come along after them, and they learned that this was a way to make a buck. And so that just developed that tradition. Yeah, they're all black, and that you can draw some thoughts about that. But then again, they were just the next door kids who were looking to make a buck, and they developed this skill set that was pretty unparalleled.
No, yeah, and I was thumbing while you were talking. I was thumbing through your book because I knew there was a map, and there it is right there. I don't know if anybody can see it, probably not in there, but it does show that Augusta Country Club. There's a neighborhood called the Sandhills, and you just mentioned that. What percentage do you think of the people of the caddies came from the Sandhills? How high was that? You
Probably
think?
75%.
Okay, and that's right next door to the Augusta Country Club, which is adjacent to Augusta National. In fact, I think isn't it Amen Corner where they really touch? I think they put a fence up, but is it behind 12 or 13? One of those holes, I guess,
The,
where
the
they
whole
touch.
place, the whole place has a fence around it now. Carl Jackson tells a story that he could walk down the outskirts of the 16th and 17th holes at Augusta Country Club and walk through a patch of woods, and there was a hole in the fence behind 13T at Augusta National, and that's how he got to the property. And he used
So what you're telling me is there might be hundreds and hundreds of Augusta natives who played golf, who played Augusta National, but played it on the sly.
Well, there's a great story, and I don't remember this guy's name, but Augusta National's closed in the summer, but there was this young man who played golf at Augusta College who was at a bar one night in the summer and was asked about Augusta National. Said, well, I can go play there anytime I want to. And the person said, what are you talking about? So, well, I can go over there at night. And what he did, he told the story of how he went up on the 12th green and put a towel on the green. He went up to the 12th tee and hit his shot on 12 and went up on the green, and the ball was sitting on the towel. And he said, that's where I made my hole in one on number 12. So
That's a good.
So Augusta National, probably within the last 30 or 40 years has become like Fort Knox. You can't get in there. But prior to that, you could get in there, if you knew the place to go and so forth like that.
Yeah. So what was it like for you living in Augusta was it 10 years about?
I lived in Augusta from 91 until 2000. Yeah.
Okay. And just so everybody knows who doesn't know, Ward's a Durham native, UNC guy. So, so you moved down there. You went from the Durham newspaper to Augusta. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I would think I was working in Columbia in the late 80s. And so I knew a little bit about the Augusta paper, and it was kind of I would generously call it a sleepy newspaper in the mid 80s. And you turned it in. And when you were there, you guys really, really turned it on. I mean, and there's a lot of pressure there, I'm guessing, especially isn't Mr. Morris, the owner of the former owner of the chain, is a bigwig at Augusta National, right?
Mr. Morris is a member of Augusta National. His brother was a member of Augusta National. So I got the greatest advice from the longtime golf writer at the Augusta Chronicle, David Weston.
Yeah.
David's now retired, but one day early in my tenure, I was walking up to the clubhouse and Mr. Morris was coming down in his green coat, and he saw me and said, Ward, why did we run this ad in the newspaper today? And it was some ad that he didn't care for. And I said, I don't have any idea, Mr. Morrison. And so I went back and called the office and I said, Mr. Morrison is asking about this ad and so forth like that. And Weston was sitting beside me in the press building, and he said, I got some advice for you. I said, what's that? He said, if you're at the golf course at Augusta National and the match see Mr. Morris come and go the other way. Well, he's always going to find something that's concerning to him, and you just need to go find another place to go. It's not being offensive toward him, but you don't need to hear what he's going to have to say.
Well, that's brings back fond memories. You talking about David Weston, because he was the easiest person to find in Augusta, because when I was covering the tournament, smoking wasn't allowed in the media center. So he was always in the back row at the very back where they allowed people to smoke. So, but he did a great job for years and years. I hope they're still hiring him for Masters Week.
Oh, they do. He still does that. He writes the lead story every day. And David has written more words about the Masters than anybody in the world. And and probably twice as many, because he used to write all these special section stories. So he's written, gosh, I don't know how many. We tried to calculate that at one time, and I don't think we could count that high. So it's pretty cool that he's done that. He used Nick Price during one of those Masters trips to Florida, saw David coming and called him the face of the Masters.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't know if the members would like that, but yeah. especially if he's got his his cigarette going, which he usually did. But anyway, although gosh, it amazes me. I think we're probably about the same age, but golfers all smoked. I think Nicklaus smoked back in the 60s. I mean, maybe Gary Player didn't. But
Arnold Palmer did. One of the greatest pictures ever at Augusta is on the second tee is Hogan and Palmer standing waiting to tee off, and both of them are wearing cardigan sweaters, and both of them got some cigarettes fired up there. Palmer says that's the picture that convinced him to quit smoking, or at least quit smoking publicly, because he didn't want the look. So
I remember being following around in the 90s, and John Daly was playing with Nick Faldo, and both of them had their smokes going in between shots. You never saw it on TV, but both of those guys, but nowadays I don't think many of them do. I mean, everybody's into fitness. There might be a few old guys still smoking, but not a whole lot.
No, I agree. It's that's an old pastime there.
Yeah. So what's your association with the Masters nowadays, Ward? You still do some stuff with them, right?
Yeah, I help out with some editorial oversight on masters.com.
Okay.
So we're in the throes of that now, as you would
Oh yeah.
expect. So we do a lot of not only the written word, but video, live shows, hole by hole scoring, every shot by every player. So it's mind boggling how much we do to try to the biggest. When I started working for them in 2011, the first thing they said was, picture this, if somebody in the middle of Europe was able to access our website, can we make it feel like they're here? And that's always been the mission that they've tried to do, is bring the Masters to people that cannot attend for whatever reason.
And I'm going back and forth, but just another question about the caddies, going back to them. So did any of the caddies, or very many of them, ever use that job? Did somebody ever use them at Augusta? And believe me, or employ them at Augusta? And I know it's special. That's a special thing, because those caddies at Augusta knew that course especially well. But did any of them go on to be regular tour caddies?
Well, Carl did that. Carl did that a little bit for Crenshaw.
Okay.
It wasn't nearly as successful he was at Augusta, but a guy named Buck Moore, Buck caddy there for a long time. Buck's son is, since you're in basketball territory, Ricky Moore, who's an assistant at North Carolina A&T now. Ricky was the point guard on Connecticut's 1999 national championship team.
That's right. I read that. I think I saw that. Did I see that in your book? I think I did, because that sounds familiar.
The point guard for the other team was Will Avery at
Duke guy, right?
who is now an assistant at Duke.
Yeah.
So Will Avery's great uncle was Nathaniel Ironman Avery, who caddied for Arnold Palmer. And so it was like a caddy versus caddy point guard showdown kind of situation.
I think I remember that anecdote in your book. Yeah.
Yeah. And Will Avery is flabbergasted every time that I speak with him. I say, Will, I'd rather go to the Duke Carolina basketball game at Cameron than I would be going to a Sunday at the Masters. He said, I can't believe you say that. And I said, it's true. Even though the Sunday at the Masters is really cool, there's nothing like 2 hours at Cameron with the students saying go to hell Carolina and just watching that game. That's pretty cool.
Well, as somebody who only went to Cameron a few times to work, I can say I didn't enjoy the knees in my back.
No.
and I didn't enjoy having to get there an hour before game time to get to my seat, because there was no way to, unless they're going to airlift you into it, to get to it. But yeah, we're in the wrong places. I don't know. Are you in Florida now? Are you in where are you headquartered at? Are you back in Durham? Where do you work most of the time?
I live in Jacksonville, Florida. When I left the Chronicle, I worked for the PGA Tour for 10 years.
Yeah.
Then I left and sort of did my own thing. So we just stayed in Jacksonville. So I can get on beautiful I-95 and get to North Carolina pretty quickly if there's not traffic blocked in South Carolina on 95. So
I was going to say we need to trade places, at least physically, because I'm a football guy. I'm from an SEC school, and I don't understand this obsession with basketball. And I think it's terrible for the SEC that we got all these teams playing in this tournament now when it's really spring football season, and we shouldn't be wasting our time with that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So John, you're an SEC guy. Which school?
Well, come lately, Missouri.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Gotcha.
But it never ceases to amaze me. I live here in Greensboro. I mean, I don't know any place where basketball is so preeminent. I mean, I've never lived in Kentucky or Indiana, but yeah, it's and we're getting I'm getting off the subject here, but it's becoming such a mess with everybody chasing the football dollars, and it's really people here just don't get it or don't understand it or disillusioned with it or whatever it is. I mean, your alma mater went and got Bill Belichick. At least they get it, you know. And
I
when they're
guess.
and we'll talk again when they're in the Big Ten in a few years with Virginia.
Probably true. Probably true.
so, so anyway, enjoy those trips to Lincoln, Nebraska, Tar Heel fans. No, I'm just kidding. As somebody who's been in the league with Nebraska, I can tell you, yeah, that's a tough one. But anyway, so we're coming up on the Masters, and who you like, Ward? You follow this pretty closely, who you like in the Masters 2 weeks from now?
Well, I could go chalk and say Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy, but
Yeah, yeah,
there's I'm intrigued by Justin Thomas.
yep.
Just by the fact that, he shot 62 here at the Players Championship. He was a contention at down in Tampa. I just see his game coming around, and I think he's motivated to play well. So I say Justin. So I think if we were having a fantasy draft, he might be my number one pick.
I tell you what, I think you mentioned chalk. I think this year is maybe as big a chalk year with, I guess, people like me thinking there are fewer real contenders. I think Victor Hovland would be somebody else who could win. I mean, there's everybody, 20 or 30 guys can win.
Yep.
And people forget at the Masters that you've got a smaller group of people who can win because you've got a smaller group of players. And that group of players includes people who are in there because they won 20, 30 years ago. So, but I'm going to throw this one out. I'm
Okay.
looking for my South Carolina boy, Lucas Glover, to play well this year.
Oh yeah.
Never plays well really at Augusta, but
Yeah.
hits it
Yeah.
long. Can't putt a lick. I don't know if that's important at Augusta.
Yes, that's fairly important.
You
Yeah, he hits the ball so well. I think he would do quite well there. You're right. Yeah, that's a good pick. Plus, Lucas,
He's hot right now.
he came to the Masters as a kid too, as I
Yeah.
recall. So he
Yeah.
he knows the lore of the place. So you would think he would really appreciate and know a whole lot about it. So.
Yeah. Well, how many guys do you think in 2 weeks? How many will there be any Augusta National regular caddies carrying bags? Is Carl back again for year 55 or?
Maybe a couple. Last year, Tommy Fleetwood hired one because
Okay.
his caddy was ill, and didn't he finish second? I think he did, if I'm not mistaken.
He was
So
up there.
that was valuable for him because I think he learned some new things about the golf course that he wasn't aware of prior to that.
Okay.
So a lot of folks don't know, but here we are talking 2 weeks before the Masters. A lot of guys go do scouting trips to Augusta National in advance. Club rules say that you can't have your own personal caddy tote for you during those practice rounds prior to Masters week. So they have to get an Augusta National caddy. So what'll happen is Rory McIlroy will go, and his caddy may go with him, but he can't caddy, so he'll walk around with him. So it's like a true scouting trip.
Yeah.
There's
So
there's a gentleman who's a longtime caddy at Augusta National, a guy named Steve Kling, and Steve Kling has befriended Dustin Johnson. So Dustin will go in advance, and Austin Johnson, Dustin's brother, will walk around with him and say, hey, this green's be redone, this is a new tee, et cetera, et cetera. Same situation. Steve Kling is pals with Ted Scott, who's Scotty Scheffler's buddy, caddy, excuse me. And not only does the same thing happen when Scotty goes in and plays in advance, but Ted Scott stays with Steve Kling.
Mhm.
He rooms with
Wow.
him. So therefore,
So,
he
yeah.
probably is getting some tidbits of information that other guys are not. So that's really cool inside situation there.
So to make sure I understand the rules, say Ben Crenshaw came there in 1996 and Carl Jackson is a caddy at the Augusta National Golf Club. Could Carl caddy for him during his practice round there?
Probably because Carl's a former club caddy and so forth. That may be a little bit of a gray area, but
Okay.
but
I
you're
guess
right.
what I'm saying is if you had a normal Augusta National caddy caddying for you for the Masters, could you use them in the practice round?
Yeah, I
Uh,
would think so.
oh, okay. All right.
Not 100% of them don't have that now. So
Right.
therefore, you got to come in and
Yeah.
hire local caddies.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, it's like I said with the book, it really covers some ground that people don't even maybe never even really thought of. And basically we had this group of people who learned the skills, and most of them lived within walking distance of the course and lived their lives in Augusta. And for 1 week a year, they're right there on the stage. You might not have recognized them, or you may not have paid much attention to them, but they were a big part of the Masters. And
Well, no doubt. And you recognize them now, or because of this the only place on tour where you wear this jumpsuit.
yeah,
Uh, I don't think a lot of people really, the winner of the Masters gets to take the green jacket home for a year.
yeah.
But if you're the winning caddy, if you write a letter to the club, they will clean up the caddy uniform and mail it to you. And
And
you
your book goes into detail about how a local business started making the jumpsuits back at the beginning of the tournament, and still do. I don't know if they still do today, but I would guess they do.
They do
Augusta loves
not.
tradition. Oh, they
No, they
don't.
don't. They don't. They went elsewhere to do it. But Fred Deitch and his company, International Uniform, originated that uniform. Um, and so they became famous for doing it. And you can still go downtown to their shop in Augusta, and they do caddy bibs for a lot of private clubs and tournaments and things like that. And there will be an old caddy suit over there on a mannequin in the corner, sort of hidden away a little bit. So
Yeah, so you can go see that. I guess I never went downtown much, and that's another thing about Augusta is there's more to the town than Washington Road, which a lot of that's really what the Augusta people or the Masters people travel, right?
oh,
You
no
don't see a
doubt,
whole lot.
no
Yeah,
doubt. One thing to keep an eye on this year, John, is September 27th of last year, Augusta basically got hit by the hurricane. The hurricane deviated up through Augusta, then took a northwest turn and hit Western North Carolina. So Western North Carolina's gotten a lot of publicity about the devastation that happened there. But Augusta basically was hit by a hurricane. It's unbelievable how many
uh-huh.
trees are taken down there. And I don't know that you'll be able to see that on television, but
Uh-huh.
some of they've had some deforestation in a couple of places, which there'll be less trees than there were previously. It's particularly noticeable when you get outside the property. Some of the neighborhoods you can now see at a distance versus being under the landscape of trees.
By the way, I appreciate the segue. Yesterday we put something on triadgolf.com about an update of the courses up in Western North Carolina, and you're right, it was devastating, and people up there, not just, I mean, people's lives were torn apart. I hate to talk about the golf courses, but it did a lot of property damage, and people are still recovering from that. And I didn't know that it hit Augusta so much, and it's funny. Part of what's fun about Augusta, I think, for me in the off season is finding out which big magazines or whatever are going to rent a helicopter and fly over the course and try to figure out what the course is doing that they're going to unveil different this year.
Yeah,
So
it's
I guess they were
it's
busy this year doing cleanup, huh?
Oh gosh, well, Augusta National gave $5 million to the community to try to help people that were, left homeless or their homes were damaged, or to help clean up. So
Mhm.
they've had a really unified effort there to try to clean up everything. I was there in November, and there were, stacks 10 foot high on the side of streets and neighborhoods. It was unbelievable. And there's still some of that left there. And today is 6 months since that hit. So it's
Yeah.
pretty crazy that there's still debris remaining.
Well, it's a special place, and the book is great. I really enjoyed it. I read it in about 2 days, and it was a really good read, Ward. And what are you doing now? I know you, like we said before, you're a Durham native. Uh, are you still? Do you do any book signings? Do you do that kind of stuff anymore?
I've done some book signings. Yeah, I enjoy doing podcasts like this one because we can talk more at length.
Yeah.
You know, interviews, 5, 10 minutes, something like that. You have to put so much in there tight. And, you and I can sit here and deviate and talk about basketball and whatever else. So that's fun.
Hey, if I
So,
got a Tar Heel on there, we're going to talk about basketball. It just happens. It's not my fault either.
well,
I'm sorry.
I think Carolina's got the number one ranked college golfer now, David Ford. I think,
They do. And
yeah,
yeah, and we've
David
written
won
that
last
on.
week. I think he won last week, and I think that secured his tour card.
Yeah, probably did. I know. I don't know the details on the university program, but it probably did. The one we wrote something about him. He won his last tournament. I think you just said that. He's a lefty. I didn't know he was a lefty.
Yeah.
Uh, he's from Georgia, so
Twin brother on the same team is a righty.
right, right,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. So interesting. And we've got next week here, or next week the women's amateur invitational in Augusta, right?
The Augusta National Women's Amateur starts Wednesday. It's Wednesday, Thursday, and then they cut the field. But the cool thing about that event is everybody in the field gets to go play a practice round on Friday at Augusta National.
Right.
And Augusta National, this word encouraged in quotation marks, encourages all the participants to take an Augusta National caddy when they play that Friday practice round.
Oh yeah. Well, we've got a young lady, Macy Pate from Winston-Salem, who's going to be in the field. Who plays for Wake Forest, and she's best known for shooting 57 at Bermuda Run when she was
Yeah, I
in high
remember
school.
that. I
In high
remember
school,
that.
so she's very excited. We got another Wake Forest player, Carolina Kachara, I think, is in the field, and we've had Wake Forest winners in the past in the short
Well,
history.
Jennifer Cupcho in particular,
Yeah.
when Jennifer won the first Augusta National Women's Amateur, she took an Augusta National caddy, Brian McKinley, in the final round. She ditched her father, the caddy for her offside. Her father he understood what was going on,
He
but
got to walk around the course still, though.
oh yeah, oh,
So
no doubt,
yeah,
no
yeah,
doubt. So what happened in that final round? That was a great final round when she won, but on the eighth green, she had a migraine headache
hmm
and lost vision in one of her eyes.
right.
And on the ninth and the 10th hole, she went from shot to shot with her eyes closed because she couldn't see properly. And McKinley guided her through that and got her some medication, got her a drink. And by the time that the migraine wore off on the 11th hole, she was still right there. And then she finished like what, 5 under over the last 6 holes or
Yeah,
something.
she came in strong despite the migraine. And
So
we had another player followed her up, and I I don't want to butcher her name, but it's Meg. It starts with an M. Uh,
yes, yep,
huh?
yeah, I know who you're talking about. She's now
She's a broadcaster.
she's now in our line of work. She's
Yes.
now a broadcast journalist. So
Will you say that name for me, Ward?
I don't remember. I gotta look. You'll have to maybe look it up to do that. So
I could spell it. I just don't. Yeah, it's Italian. It's like Maglio it's something like that. I can't.
yeah, her mom was also her caddy.
Okay.
Yep.
So anyway, so how many times do you play Augusta National during the year, Ward?
I've played Augusta National 10 times.
Okay.
All of them when I was either at the Durham paper or the Augusta Chronicle.
Okay.
Because, you media day, which you've played,
Yeah.
John, the day
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
Augusta National is kind enough that in late May, they offer local media the opportunity to play. And so
Oh, wow. Good.
that's
Good.
how I got the opportunity to play most of the time.
And I
So,
think they have a day where if rain or shine, one day that you can play for the volunteers and
yeah,
folks who work there.
that's generally in late May, right before the course closes for the summer. Yeah.
So the course, and this is something important to know too. I mean, most people know that it's a short season, but they close when Memorial Day,
Yeah,
and then
Memorial Day that closed thereabouts and then reopen in the middle of October.
okay, and are
Yeah.
they open during the dead of winter? I mean,
Oh yeah,
weather permitting.
October to May. Yeah, yeah.
So what does the course look like? Is the course still green in the
Oh, the
wintertime?
course is overseed, is terrifically green.
Okay,
The only difference is probably from fall into winter, the golf course is probably a little damper and plays a little bit longer. It's not as fast and firm as it plays during the Masters.
okay.
That's one of the things that when Dustin Johnson won in 2020 in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
he really made an effort to get there early and get Steve Kling, the guy I mentioned earlier, to give him some insight because not many people had played competitive golf there in the fall. So
Yeah, it's interesting to me that the season, and I look back kind of shaking my head. I read all these stories about Augusta, and especially nearby Aiken, South Carolina, just across the river, being a winter place for the folks from New England and New York. And I think it's not that warm in Aiken, South Carolina in
no, it's
January,
not. No,
but
it's
I
not.
guess, but I guess it is if you live in Boston. I don't know, or you
Well,
live in New York.
what happened is in the early 1900s, Augusta and Aiken were a winter retreat for people in the Northeast. A lot of times because the train ran down there. Florida wasn't as big of a deal then, and Florida came to the fore eventually, but Augusta and Aiken were the place to go in the winter. It may have been cold, but at least it wasn't snow on the ground every day.
Now, same was true of Pinehurst. It was on the railroad, and, and I know for sure, I live it every day. Pinehurst is not that warm during the wintertime. So,
neither, neither is Myrtle Beach. So
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. And I lived there for a number of years, as you know. But anyway, so if I want to get your book, what is the best way to do it? It's on Amazon, I think, right?
a lot of places, your local bookstore should have it. Amazon, you can go to blairpub.com, and that's not a place to go get a cold beverage. It's BLAIRPUB.com, Blair Publisher, which is based in Durham, believe it or not, my
Yeah.
hometown. They republished the book. So they did a great job in making the book look good and helping publicize it and so forth like that.
Is it
So
available both soft and hardcover,
there's
or
not a hard cover. It's just a cover you have in hand,
okay?
which is which
Well,
is a which is a nicer version of a soft cover in my mind. So
yeah. So how much of the book is different from your 2004 book? What was that called?
it's
Anthem in the
similar.
Bag?
It's similar. I updated all the caddies that I wrote about originally, Carl Jackson, Willie Peterson, et cetera, like that. And I added a chapter on Sandhills, the area where most of these caddies came from. I figured that was important.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know when this is going to air, John, but Thursday, April 3rd in Augusta, they're going to, in the Sandhills community, a local artist has done a rendering to honor all these old black caddies. And so they're going to unveil that in the week before the Masters. And they've even taken the original book I did and they do a play out of it. It's called The Men on the Bag Experience.
Okay.
And they get three local actors to come in and they portray caddies.
Okay.
And they have a local singer come in and she will sing in between each part and have like period music, like Motown music.
Mhm.
And the first time I went and saw it, John, I felt like I was watching Hamilton for golf. because it was every during the songs, they're singing, the Temptations, My Girl and so forth like that, and everybody is singing in unison. So I thought it was really cool, and that's I didn't write a play, but they took the book and developed this script out of it, so it's pretty neat.
So do you have did you have the rights to it, or did you get any royalties, or did you take them to court or anything?
It's just on a local level now. Let's see what happens if they try to go beyond that.
Yeah, if
So
they make money, then we might have some. Yeah, I got it.
yeah.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you joining me, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested in what goes on behind the scenes and the caddy system, and yeah, we'll see how that plays this year, and see what goes on. I mean, it's maybe we'll have a local caddy, and I tried to mention this earlier, but I guess I forgot. Carl Jackson, is he back for year 55?
Carl will be 78 next Monday, the 31st of March. So
But he's caddied every year, hasn't he? Except for one.
well, he quit caddying full time when Crenshaw retired in 2015.
Okay. Okay.
So he'll caddy for him in the par three contest likely.
Maybe that's what they count. Maybe that's what I was counting. I'd seen somewhere where he had caddied 54 out of 55 years, and the one year he didn't, he was hurt or something
Well,
like that.
exactly. He caddied until 2015, but keep in mind he started caddying at the Masters when in the late 50s when he was like 13 years old. So he's if anybody knows that golf course pretty well, it's him. Steve Williams, who caddied for Tiger forever and ever, used to say that he got Carl's shoe size, and he would go to Nike when Tiger was with Nike, and he'd go get 2 or 3 pairs of the best Nike shoes he could and bring them to Augusta to give to Carl, hoping that Carl would give him some local knowledge, and Carl would take the shoes and thank him and wouldn't tell him anything.
Well, that's that's a good story. There's so many good stories in the book, Ward, and I hope we get a chance to catch up again sometime because there's so many more questions I have about not just the caddies, but just Augusta in general. And there's not many people. Maybe David Weston, maybe up there too, but who could fill me in as well as you could. And good luck with continued with the book because I know it's been out a year, and I'm sure it's done well. And hopefully I'll make it down to Augusta for the Golf Writers thing sometime. Not going to be there this year, and I'll say hello. But
Perfect.
thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Hope everything continues to go well there. I used to say that we don't play basketball in Florida, but I guess they do. The University of Florida is doing well, but I know they don't do barbecue like you do it up there, so I missed that. So
Yeah, well, Florida, you're in the part of Florida that you're in the North Florida, which is the South, right? So
yes.
I'm sure you can find some barbecue there.
Oh yeah, but it's not that North Carolina Eastern or Western style barbecue. You can't beat that. So pretty cool.
Well, thanks again for taking the time and continued success, and we'll look forward to maybe another book sometime.
All right, that's awesome, man. Thanks, John. I appreciate
Thanks.
it. We'll do it
Thank you.
again. Take
Thank
care.
you, Bye bye.
Bye.